Everybody, I'm Dustin.
I'm Onna, and we are not qualified to investigate the paranormal, but we might be more qualified than
Ourselves.
That's meta.
This is a meta episode.
A recap episode.
Did I ruin it?
In what way?
I don't know. All right, everybody, welcome back. For those of you tuning in for the first time, I highly recommend you don't start here. This is a recap episode, so we're actually going to go back and talk about some of the other topics that we have gone into in our previous episodes.
I guess if you are starting here, still go back and listen to the others.
Yeah, you might still want to. Actually, maybe this is a good place to start. Maybe this is episode number 1, the recap episode. Maybe we're Tarantinoing it a little bit. Yeah, maybe we're
chopping up the order.
Maybe we're mementoing it. Why are both of those words really hard to say?
Because they're not words.
Yes, they are.
Tarantinoing it.
Well, that's 2 words. You're right. That is not a word. It is 2 words. Yeah, no, we're going back to take a look at some of the other things we've talked about before. We do listen to these episodes, believe it or not. Some of you are probably like, you do? Man, you did a really shitty job with the editing. Anyway,
weird narcissists listening to their own podcast.
Yeah, because we want to be better, okay? We're trying to be better for you. And so as we, of course, go back and listen, we think about things and hear things that we said that we're like, oh, no, we didn't mention blah, 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 or we didn't say this, or we didn't say that. Not only that, but Anna has a fun game. We're going to play with it. So she'll explain that because she's explained it to me 5 times and I still don't get it.
Oh, that sounds really fun. I just have prompts of thought questions for each episode.
No, it'll be good. Okay, so I think we just need to kick this off right away and get going here. So the first episode, the Black-Eyed Beings, is what we named it, but what it really was about was black-eyed children. As usually these black-eyed beings are minors. And I don't mean people who dig in the ground. I mean people who are under the age of 18.
That might explain the black eye.
Yeah, that's right. And so, as we went through and we looked at these, we looked at a couple of different stories. One was the first recorded story of it, which was in Texas, and a man who was going to pay his cable bill just ran into these black-eyed children. The second was a couple of kids who were out past curfew in the UK during the pandemic and who were terrified by this black-eyed child running around their campsite. And then we did look at some evidence. We actually talked a lot about a fake thing that happened, which was a YouTuber who created a YouTube channel based upon him trying to capture evidence of black-eyed children or black-eyed beings, and eventually told everybody that the whole thing was fake because he had millions of viewers and they were all like, this is real, and he got doxxed. Which I didn't know that people don't know what that means. For those of you who don't know what dox means, it means for someone to identify who you are on the internet, finding documents about who you are, where you actually live, what your actual phone number is.
Yeah, even if you are already a public figure, but
yeah, it's something that happens a lot in my career. No, what am I in?
In your profession.
In my profession, thank you. Apparently speaking is not so good in my profession, but yeah, so it's something that happens a lot in my profession. You know, you see CEOs get doxxed a lot. You see activists get doxxed. Political figures get doxxed.
Anyone who pisses people off on the internet.
Right. So this guy got doxxed. He had to close down his entire YouTube account because he was getting death threats and all kinds of crazy stuff because of what was going on. He claims, of course, that he was an actor and he was just trying to portray a character. However, he didn't really say that at the beginning. It's kind of like War of the Worlds, right? Where Orson Welles was like, I thought everybody would just know this whole thing was a joke, you know?
He didn't label it a comedy YouTube channel.
Right. Or not even comedy, just an entertainment YouTube channel, yeah. So that was the Black-Eyed Children. Anna, what do you, anything we missed there? Anything that you think that we should talk about? Or
I mean, I think the brief synopsis of how we tried to provide what we try to do here, which is the explainable explanation rather than the paranormal explanation,
right?
Which isn't an explanation. It's paranormal, you know. So as the borderline skeptics that we are, we just bring our professional backgrounds. And I, as a psychologist, thought about perception. That's one of the main themes we might cut across all 10 episodes we've had. And so it was, alterations in our perception when we're afraid, alterations in our recounting of things. So altering sort of how our memory might distort what happened, like the perceived threat, as well as the features of a difficult to see person in the dark. And then we also talked about, well, why might we do that if it's a child, especially, and what might be scary about a child at night, stuff like that.
Yeah. So do we miss anything? I guess what I should say that when I say did we miss anything, of course.
Yeah.
Did you, like, when you went back and listened, where you're like, oh, I should have said blank?
I have to say I like what I said, but the caveat is always we're not paranormal investigators. I'm not a paranormal psychologist. I'm not a parapsychologist. So I don't have like all of the comprehensive.
To be fair, people who claim to be paranormal investigators have taken like a 10-hour online course.
Yeah. But I'm not studying this in labs. There are paranormal psychologists who study these topics, but I don't think anyone focuses on black-eyed beings. That's why we're doing this, because like the minutia of the paranormal is really fun to look at, each type of cryptid and ghost stories. And I think we talked about the first story a little bit later, and there was something about him.
Yeah, he was paying his cable bill. What a weirdo. With a check. He was dropping a check off at the cable company.
I think it was the fact that like the kids were there and then they were gone. You know, it was like, why?
No, he drove away from the children.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
he abandoned them. Yeah, quote unquote. Yeah, he peeled off. But anyway, go ahead.
Sorry, I talked about how, you know, if there's I think I called it post-justification of effort.
Yeah.
And I should have just said post-justification. That's my correction corner here.
Okay.
Because post-justification of effort is when you put in a lot of effort and you don't get much return. And then afterward, your brain actually increases your justification for what you did. Some people call it cognitive dissonance. In some ways, it's sort of akin to that. But I meant just post-justification. Like, why did you not help is very different than why did you go above and beyond? So
right.
And so for him, he was sort of saying, these kids disappeared, so he didn't maybe have an opportunity to help, but it's more why did he feel freaked out? And I didn't really talk about that. Like, it's hindsight bias when people say, I had a weird feeling. I just had a weird feeling. And you forget all the times that you've had weird feelings and nothing happened. So our mind kind of inflates, like, I had a weird feeling and then something happened.
Right.
So I had almost a premonition. And he was saying,
I think he was just creeped out by the situation, but yeah.
And that's kind of what I'm saying is like,
oh, they said we don't even have a gun.
Yeah. Which has nothing to do with their
That's
appearance.
weird.
Yeah.
That's just a weird thing to say to somebody.
Right.
It's like if you ran up to somebody randomly in the street and you were like, I don't have a gun. Like, I don't know how they'd react. If someone ran up to me and said that, I'd be like,
yeah, you do.
Good.
I'm pretty sure you do.
Walk away as fast as I can the other direction, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, right. That's what I was thinking of, is the animals are always the first to know, right? Animals sense things. Don't get me wrong, animals do sense things above human perception. There are literally animals who are there to see if alert an owner to alert someone to low blood sugar, possible signs of stroke. Those are like things that even humans can perceive if they're paying attention half the time, but we're not, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas animals are kind of tuned into that. Now, what I'm talking about are people who claim that animals can sense supernatural things like ghosts in the room or electrical, like weird, like unexplained electrical outages, or even some natural phenomena like earthquakes. So yeah, there are animals who can see that, but I think what happens a lot of the time is that people are like, oh, my dog started acting really weird and then the earthquake happened, so he knew. Whereas your dog might have acted really weird at one point anyway and nothing happened and you just didn't mark it in your brain because why would you? Because nothing happened.
That's hindsight bias. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what's the second part to this that we're doing?
Oh, yeah. I thought maybe we'd think about, if black-eyed children are so scary, what are other things that could be scary that could come to your door at night?
So things that can knock on my window while I'm trying to pay my cable bill.
And be scary.
I think anything. If I don't see it coming,
Okay, what other black-eyed, if it's black-eyed children?
Anything with black eyes.
Yeah.
What has black eyes in nature? Black-eyed aliens. That would scare me. For sure. Black-eyed cats, dogs, giraffes, elephants. I can keep going with animals.
Peas.
The black-eyed peas. That's right. Will.i.am. If he had black eyes and was knocking on my window, I would not open the door. I'd be like, Will, it's really cool to see you, man. I am not opening the door for you right now.
Or cans of black-eyed peas. Just open the door and there's just a stack
Any kind
of
of black-eyed peas. That's right.
Okay, anything else?
No, how
Things
about
that
you?
Come to your door and that would scare you.
You. Go.
I think if an old woman, things that are just not really that scary. Not expected.
An old woman's kind of scary.
Why?
If an old woman was just knocking at her door late at night,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, that's scary.
Yeah.
No?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, an old man, too. Okay, the Stanley Hotel.
Mm-hmm.
This was an interesting one because it was kind of the first one we did that was just like a place and then a load of supernatural / paranormal things that have happened here. Obviously, one of the stories we told, the main story we told was the Stephen King story and how he came up with the idea for The Shining. However, there are so many documented or at least passed down documented stories between the people who work at this hotel. The chef in the base, or the chef in the caves that smells like bread all the time. The lady who walks up and down the stairs at night. The children laughing. There's all kinds of paranormal activities that happen here. We even had some EVPs. This is the first time we introduced EVPs, or EVP, no S.
Yeah.
EVP, because phenomena
Samples of EVP.
Samples of EVP, which I don't think we heard anything. And you and I were both like, we don't hear it.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe our listeners did. Anyway, so what did we miss here with the Stanley? I mean, again, there's like so much to unpack here. Old buildings creak. They make noises.
Mm-hmm.
There's sounds of wind blowing because it's in Colorado, and there's storms, and that's Stephen King was there, and he was there alone. I think he was like the only person who checked into the hotel that night or something.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of crazy stuff there. What do you think?
Yeah. I think we've emphasized a lot about the fact that it's like a famous hotel and it's partly famous for this, and they attract people based on this, and the stories get told and retold. There's so much secondary gain for them to perpetuate these stories. I don't think I use that term. So
You talked a lot about prompting?
Priming.
Priming.
So I think there's priming of the guests, but then a secondary motivation on the part of the hotel for these stories to be told.
Yeah.
Because they make money.
Yeah.
So that's an important piece, and the case a lot of quote haunted establishments.
Right. This is the first time that you brought up priming, and I think it's been brought up since in some other episodes that we've done.
Mm-hmm.
But this is definitely the first time that you've kind of, that you kind of presented that as an idea of, and also just a theory within psychology.
Yeah, and some people might call me out or criticize that, like, technically priming is like stimuli very close together, and so I might be talking a little bit more about expectancy theory than priming. So I guess I should clarify that. So expectancy is much more in my background of research, but it's like, what do you think is going to happen when you drink a beer? How do you think you're going to feel?
Oof, nowadays that is a loaded question.
Right.
It could be great, could be great for 5 minutes and then terrible.
Yeah.
Could be great for an hour and a half and then terrible. Either way, it's probably going to end up being terrible.
Sure. Okay, so when you were 21.
Oof. I'm sorry. Then I was supposed to fill in the rest. When I was 21, I'd drink one beer. Shit. Keep going.
Okay. In general, alcohol makes you feel fill in the blank.
Great.
Yeah. And you could keep going with the way you fill in that blank. So and that's before you even drink alcohol. And so there's been experimental study after experimental study that expectations, what people expect to happen, will happen, even if you give them false or fake alcohol. They will behave in a way that's consistent with what their expectations are for the impact of that. Yeah.
Can you start giving me like fake beers and telling me they're real beers?
You want to buy NA beer and then pour it for you and give it to you.
Yes. Before the episodes.
Hide it in like a separate secret fridge somewhere. Yep. Sure. Actually, there's a movie with Nicolas Cage where that happens to him.
Leaving Las Vegas. Yeah, I saw it.
No. It's a medication. Someone gets, so it's a placebo effect for substances, but this is in our lives. Expectations have an impact on reality or our experience. So
right.
I think that's very powerful.
All right. So black-eyed children. We don't want to admit that we're scared by children, so we make up some weird theory about them in our minds that says they're black-eyed. Boom, roasted. Stanley Hotel, ghost, priming, boom, roasted. With the Stanley Hotel, though, what's your question?
If so, as I talked about secondary gain, the big motivation of the hotel to attract guests because it's haunted. If you owned a hotel, what paranormal activity would you use to attract people?
Spontaneous combustion.
That will happen in your room.
Yep.
Good luck keeping your hotel afloat.
What? That's like, you got to prove it. You know what I mean? And it's really easy, too, because you can just have, like, I don't know, natural gas lines that have holes poked in them, like, throughout the hotel, like with little, like, spark things that, like, randomly go off.
Terrifying.
Yeah.
People.
Well, what are they looking for? You're going to go to a place with a ghost and you don't want to be terrified?
Exactly. They want to be terrified. Mine would be like the Bigfoot Inn. Like you might have a sighting of Bigfoot
Yeah.
while you're here. He might just be in the hot tub. Who knows?
Yeah, he's a guest. Like, what if Bigfoot, like, Las Vegas has like their acts actually get to stay like in like the, the penthouse suites or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So like Bigfoot is in the penthouse suite of the Onna Hotel.
Yeah, you just imagine him like with his hair in a towel and just walking around.
Okay.
Get nice.
Okay. Next up, parallel universes and the Mandela effect. This was a really interesting one. Because I think it has more to do with psychology than anything else.
Oh my gosh. Well, and even in the name, that first story that you told about the woman in the forest
Hiking,
who
yeah.
hiked and found a cabin of some sorts with a 17th
Stone
century
cabin
party happening inside. She
Yeah,
stepped halfway through
the
the door,
conquistadors
and then
were hanging out and wait, not conquistador. Yeah, that's right. Like the Spanish. Is that the right terminology?
the Spanish explorer.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
they were conquistadors,
I
right?
think so. Do they still use that term? And
I'm thinking of matador, which is the guys who fight bulls too.
That's
But no,
totally
conquistadors.
different job.
Yeah, she like walked in on these conquistadors like having a party or whatever, and she got pulled out halfway, and then half of her body went numb, and she had to go through physical therapy for a really long time.
So we talked a lot about the psychology of that, potential psychology of that.
That, and then also we talked about the Mandela effect and the psychological quote-unquote phenomena that happens there, where basically what happened is a woman was largely uneducated to the point of where they didn't even know that Nelson Mandela was still alive, noticed a pattern that a lot of people thought that Nelson Mandela was dead, and then started collecting data, amateurly started collecting data from online sources or people who just emailed her, and then coined a phrase, and it caught on because of Shaquille O'Neal not being in a movie about him being a genie in the White House.
Yeah.
I think if you said that sentence to somebody 20 years ago, their minds would have exploded. Like, this is even a thing, right? The Mandela effect.
Really?
So, yeah.
It just seems so, and that's where, to me, it was like, we talked about how it's not a term in psychology because it's so already been named.
Right.
False memory.
Yeah.
It's so incredibly common.
But that's not as
shared
catchy.
false memory. No.
Yeah.
It's not as catchy. The idea
As
that like
the Mandela effect.
yeah, well, what if we're all having the same false memory? Then it's an alternate universe. That's quite ridiculous.
Now, give credit where credit is due as far as parallel universes go. Quantum physicists are exploring this as a real possibility.
Yes.
That there are actual, you watch the Marvel movies, the Multiverse of Madness, like all this kind of crazy shit, endless possibilities, endless possible universes. There is some theory in quantum physics behind that, right? The Schrodinger cat experiment we mentioned, I told you to go Wikipedia it. I hope you did. A lot of stuff goes into that. But yeah, it is possible that there are universes where every single decision we've made, or more to the point, every single subatomic particle can do the opposite of what it has done in our universe, which could mean that our decisions are also reversed or opposite of what they are in this current universe.
Yeah. It could mean we're all living in a simulation.
Could mean it. And it's fun to think about.
It's fun to think about. I actually think the most recent, very cool, very interesting fictionalized version of it was the newest episode of Black Mirror, the first episode of the new season.
Oh yeah,
I thought
really
that was
good.
such a cool way of kind of showing what a living in a simulation could mean. Is like there's a quantum computer and we have been created. Yeah, we have been created in that computer. Check it out.
But anyway, so yeah, credit where credit is due for sure. Parallel universes are possible. The possibility of them bleeding through to each other. Again, I kind of postulated that it's every ghosts and all those things that we're seeing are possibly the bleed through of other universes. Now, us having memories implanted in us of those other universes, which is what the Mandela effect, quote unquote, is claiming it is. But again, we already have a term for this that's been studied heavily in the psychological field called false memory, right? Nothing that we didn't I can't think of anything that we didn't mention. I mean, there are a million Mandela effect things that people talk about on Reddit all the time.
Yeah.
Like, oh no, I totally remember it being like this. And it's interesting that people remember the same things, but also if you take it into like cultural context and everything else that was going temporal context, things that were going on at the time, isn't it super possible that people just misremember the same things because of where we're at in our society and where we're at?
Yeah, if you misremember it alongside another person, you say it's so many of the times they're pop culture or consumer memories or social history of some kind that's like or current events that you all were already sharing cultural context if you were aware of all that at the time.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay.
So that's my question.
Mm-hmm.
Was a false memory of something that no one else has said they shared with you, of something that you kind of wish was a Mandela effect, that you had someone else who also had a false memory of that?
Okay, wait. So the question is, have I ever had anybody confirm a false memory with me?
No.
Oh.
Do you have any false memories of things that no one else shares? Like,
yes.
And I don't mean personal false memories. I mean like that you wish was a Mandela effect that would make you feel more validated. Because that maybe is the piece we didn't talk about. Is it is very validating to have other people share them.
I've got a great one.
Please.
I invented the term Evel Knievel.
What?
I never knew that Evel Knievel existed. But I invented the term evil. I was like, when I was a kid, I said Evel Knievel before I knew that there was an Evel Knievel. I stand by this. You can ask my sister, who's known me. She's my older sister, so she's known me. So I will stand by this. I said Evel Knievel before I ever knew that Evel Knievel existed, even though it existed decades before I was ever born.
And if other people also said that, then you would feel validated?
I'd be like, yeah, thank you. It's about damn time that somebody agrees with me about Evel Knievel.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
How about you?
It's not
Go.
Evel Knievel.
You don't believe me about it? Okay,
No,
fine.
no.
Fine. There's one more person.
So it's musical. It's in the realm of music, and it's sort of embarrassing to admit that I confused the singer of Aerosmith with the singer of the Rolling Stones.
That's not that confusing.
And I wish that I don't know anybody else who did. I wish other people would say that. They're like a decade apart at least, right?
So Steven Tyler versus Mick Jagger?
Mick Jagger, the Mick Jagger.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like blanking on them both right now, but I would mix them up and their music a little bit too, which is really... So if someone were like, in a parallel universe, they are the same band or something like that.
That's not that embarrassing.
Okay, well, that's mine. I wish that other people shared that.
So two wrinkly old white guys you mixed up in your head?
Yeah.
God, how embarrassing. Who sing kind of similar sounding music. 12-bar blues with
I have
a
people
little
in my
bit
life
of
who I feel
distortion.
embarrassed to admit this, who like love these people, and I used to mix them up. Not so much now. Mm-hmm. Because clearly one is more prominent and better musician, to be honest.
I invented Evel Knievel, Anna.
You're right. That's more embarrassing.
You think that mixing up two old white wrinkly guys is more embarrassing than me coming up with the term Evel Knievel. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Next up, following in line with this quantum mechanics and quantum theory parallel universe thing is Randonautica. That's the next one we did. Randonautica is an application on your phone that apparently uses a quantum random number generator to link your intentions to a geolocation in your vicinity to help you find your intentions or to help guide you to what your intentions might be. Very interesting thing. It led a group of kids to a dead body, and they were looking for, what was it, travel or adventure or something, and it led them to a dead body that was stuffed into a suitcase. Now, terrible, right? That's not but there have been hundreds of reports of Randonautica leading people to supernatural things as well. I think the dead body is obviously something that's very well documented. Obviously, because they called the police. They did the right thing. They called the police. The police got involved. There was actually arrest conviction that happened due to that chain of events. So we actually went, this is the first time we did like a field investigation where we drove around and we tried to realize our intentions. Mm-hmm. We tried to have Randonautica help us realize our intentions by trying to help us find something paranormal. Mm-hmm. That was our intention. We didn't find anything paranormal.
So it doesn't work.
It didn't work. It didn't work twice.
For us. 2
out of 2, so it's a 0% success rate for us. Now, we could keep going with this. This could be something that we follow up on in another couple of months. Maybe we do this once every week and we try to when we report back on it, right? We take some notes and report back on it. Like, did we hear anything? Did we see anything?
Well, and I think what we didn't maybe talk a bit about is the radius. I know you can set the radius. Yeah. Which is like, what is the likelihood that if you set the radius to, would we set it to like a half a mile from our house? So that there's going to be something paranormal within a half a mile.
Why wouldn't there be?
I guess, that's the argument.
Yeah, if paranormal stuff existed.
It should be everywhere.
It should exist everywhere, for sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, so then we also talked about the PAIR research experiment, the pseudo-random number generators around the world that, sync up sometimes for no reason, but then something big happens. And then also the quantum effects that or the effect that quantum mechanics plays in consciousness. So our synapses have like quantum receptors at the end of them. So, why, we know that quantum mechanics works in a certain way, kind of.
Yeah, we don't fully know it.
We don't understand, but we do know that there is some kind of, for lack of a better term, wireless transmission that happens between quanta. And if two particles ever come into contact and they are entangled, and that those things that are then entangled then have, some form of communication or some form of connection for eternity, but I don't know because I'm not a quantum physicist.
And I think that just listening back to that episode, I think before I was like, I had to have this explained to me in so many different ways, so many times I still don't fully understand what. So when you interact with Randonautica, you are interacting on a quantum level with their server.
That is the thought. You are interacting on a quantum level with their quantum random number generator, which again, that would insinuate that they had a quantum computer somewhere. Yeah. And quantum computers take a lot of energy to run right now. You have to run them at like close to absolute zero, so negative 273 degrees, right? Which takes a lot of something. Very sensitive equipment. Like if you sneeze in the room with it, like it ruins the calculation.
Wow.
I don't know if sneezing in the room is going to cause that actually, but something like it's a very sensitive thing, right? And it still is being run technically by traditional computing systems. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into quantum computing. I very much doubt that this app has a quantum computer running in a basement somewhere. Although maybe you never know. But like you see places like the People's Republic of China's government has a quantum computer. Google has a quantum computer. IBM has a quantum computer. Randonautica having access to a quantum computer?
Right. Yeah. I think it is another one where we're acknowledging the possibility of a technology like this in the future, or that's it's kind of like acknowledging the possibility of the multiverse.
Of jetpacks.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's your question for this one?
If you had an app like this, what would you call it?
Welcome to Spooksville. Population U. That would be the tagline. How about you?
I'm not very good at answering my own questions. That's not what psychologists do. We ask them.
Oh, okay. Well, I can be your subject then. You just ask me and I'll say it. Okay, next up is EVP, Electronic Voice Phenomena. This was your episode. Yeah. You were presenting on this one.
Yeah.
So you had me listen to a couple of different EVP recordings.
Allegedly.
Alleged EVP recordings. The first one you played for me, which is allegedly the most substantive, right? Like
when you Google that, with a cursory search.
And it's 9 minutes long, and it is something. If you haven't listened to it, go back and listen to that episode, but also listen to the EVP recording. Really interesting. Again, I'm a combat veteran. I listened to it and I heard some things that were, I don't want to say triggering, but something along those lines, right? And so if you have been either in an active shooter situation, I hate to put it this way, if you've been in an active shooter situation or just been around gunfire a lot and it bothers you, I recommend proceeding with caution. I was not expecting that. To me, it did sound like someone going from door to door shooting people and them screaming. Like that's kind of what I heard. Now, that could have been just because of my life experiences. That could have been for a lot of different reasons, but I thought it was really interesting. It also just sounded, it was like the digitization of some of the things were so fake. I was like, it sounded like the Matrix, there were just some like really weird things there, but kind of an interesting listen if what they say is true, which is they went to this undisclosed location that they can't tell you about because of an NDA and listened and recorded this thing without hearing any of it. Like they were just sitting in a stairway, I guess.
Yep.
If you believe their story and this is what they truly recorded, something's going on.
It is pretty wild.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. But, we also talked a little bit about the physics behind recording capabilities, digital recorders, analog control recorders, how those things interact with our physical world, how our physical world interacts with them.
Yeah, you brought your tech knowledge to help explain the likely possibility of the interference that they picked up.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like my first thing was like, oh, it's definitely interference. And you were like, well, couldn't they be faking it? And I was like, oh yeah, that's that's number one, right? That's the first possibility.
Anything else you would add or comment on that episode?
Yeah, I'm trying to. Okay, and then we did a couple of EVP collections as well. I'll let you go into, kind of what you talked about, but nothing really to add. I still feel the same way I do about EVP recordings, which is that there are just so many other things going on in those electronic devices. And it's really hard to pinpoint. A lot of the times, that first recording you played for me, that was intense. Yeah. It's like the most intense one I've ever heard. Usually when you watch those dumbass ghost shows on, Travel Channel or History Channel, quote unquote, or wherever you watch those, and don't get me wrong, if you watch them, I'm not giving you a hard time. I love them. I watch them all the time. They'll be like, I'll be like, oh, we captured an EVP and it's it's true evidence of the paranormal. And it sounds like someone sneezed
it's like
in the background. Yeah. It's like, they said, help me. And I'm like, they did?
They said,
yeah. It's like, help me? I don't hear it half the time. Super. I have heard some good ones on YouTube, like going back and like listening to some like user submitted YouTube things. But with that, I mean, there's After Effects. There's every Adobe piece of software can help that, which is unfortunate.
Well, so I'm sitting with holding the two feelings of being both really proud that I could introduce you to something you hadn't already heard, given how much you listen to this stuff.
Yeah.
And also really sad that I triggered you slightly.
Oh no. And it wasn't anything that was disturbing to that level, right? It was just something that I was like, whew, gunshots. Yeah, that's it's a very distinctive sound if you've heard it a lot.
Which is so interesting because on my listen, I did not hear gunshots. And that's what I talked about with the psychological explanations, is how very subjective our auditory perception is. And how we also talked about how priming and expectancy, especially when someone tells you, here's what you're going to hear it. And then we also talked about pareidolia, how we want to hear human voices or see human faces.
And then you brought up a paper written by an undergrad who was doing her studies in audiology. Mm-hmm. And it was, you were like, this is amazing because it's basically saying that none of us are being consulted on any of this. So if there is EVP, nobody brings in an audiologist to say, or an audio, specialist to say that's a human voice.
Yeah, it was. She surveyed several.
Yeah.
Quote, paranormal investigators or people who dabble in EVP, and none of them had brought in speech pathology, and audiology specialists.
And this is the thing with paranormal people, people who have like certifications or some kind of credential within the paranormal spaces. None of it is really accredited. Mm-hmm. And that's scary. That's just like, it's a private university, quote unquote, or private establishment. When I looked into hypnosis, and we'll get into that in 2 episodes here. When I looked into hypnosis, like I can be a hypnotherapist. I can be a licensed hypnotherapist. I don't have any psychological training. Mm-hmm. I don't have psychology training. Like I don't have any of that. But I can be a hypnotherapist.
Yeah, is that ethical?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But with paranormal, we say a lot, right? Where they're like, well, I did this 10-hour online course, so I can identify EVPs. Mm-hmm. And don't get me wrong, experience means a lot. If you are someone who goes out and investigates the paranormal on a daily basis for a year, 360, you've got 365, pieces of experience under your belt.
Yeah, and I don't want to be a ivory tower or credential elitist.
Right.
Because the scientific method is not owned by anyone, and it's not, everyone should use it to the extent that you can. Yeah. But it doesn't count if you just did it once with your own observation, and that's not actually the steps of how to replicate and to demonstrate and to observe. Right. So that's the weakness.
And that's what makes places like the Stanley Hotel so interesting, because people have gone there and had similar experience of the cowboy who kisses people.
Yeah. Yeah. So I do have to say, this is where I can provide with possible explanations that when psychologists study people's in experimental studies where we can actually create the stimuli, we see these kinds of expectancy theory, we see these kinds of priming effects, we see these things. I think his name is Chris French, and there are psychologists studying paranormal beliefs and doing some experiments, looking at when people report perception, things like that. So, but it still doesn't remove the possibility that the Stanley Hotel is haunted.
Right.
Mm-hmm. It's possible.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So what's your question for EVPs? EVP recordings.
And this is really, again, I'm much better at posing these questions than answering them. If there were very clean technology that could capture the voices of the deceased Or, as we say when we talked about EVP, it could also be capturing that's right.
telepathically
communicated voice phenomenon.
That's right.
If there were a tool that you could use that were actually clean and reliable, when they found that, where would you start to go to listen?
In my own house.
Yeah.
I would.
You would just...
I'd be like, who's fucking here?
Okay.
Stop watching me in the shower.
Wow.
Because I know you are.
And so there'd be a lot of people who would be like, I would not do that in my house. I wouldn't want to know.
What?
This is the people who are just not into this. Yeah.
No, but then what's the point of knowing any of that?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't want to know it. It's like, well, what's the point then? What are we doing here then?
What we're bringing is, and I think that really raises that piece of how cool it is that people are curious. So much of what that motivates the interest in the paranormal is curiosity. I like that. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm glad you like that about me.
I might be like, why don't you do that? Tell me what you find.
Okay.
I don't know if I want to listen.
Okay. Next up, the ghost testimony of Zona Hester.
Oh, wow.
This was a great one.
Mm-hmm.
I love this one.
Yeah.
It was so much fun. Okay. So the ghost testimony of Zona Hester is the first and only recorded time in U.S. history that a ghost testimony was submitted as evidence, kind of, in a murder trial in the United States of America. So very interesting stuff. Small town in West Virginia, the late 1800s. Woman was murdered. The mother was visited by her ghost, told that originally her death was ruled as an accident or as childbearing issues. And her mother had ghostly visits from her, enough to convince the local coroner to exhume the body, reinvestigate, found out that she had in fact been murdered, and the man her husband was actually convicted of her death, and the testimony of the visits of the ghost were allowed to be submitted as evidence into this court. Amazing story. Really cool. Just terrible. Okay, I'm like getting really into this, and I'm like, it's so cool. No, a woman died. It's terrible. However, justice was technically served, depending on if you believe if this guy was actually but all the evidence, past behaviors kind of point to, in my opinion, that this man was actually probably a shitbag, if not the murderer. But anyway, so really cool themes happening here. A lot of really terrible themes happening here as far as women being second-class citizens in the late 1800s. I'm not saying they're not now, but back then it was kind of like someone kind of even had to say that they saw a ghost to get anybody's fucking attention. Yeah. Women had to kind of, play the game a little bit differently. So anyway,
which was the explanation that you brought, which I thought was really compelling.
Yeah.
I talked a bit about the very common experience of people seeing their loved ones after they pass away. And what those experiences or perceptions might be all about in terms of grief and also the possibility of the paranormal. But
right. We don't, like you said, we don't know.
Yeah.
You said we know that this happens, that we see the recently deceased.
Not everybody.
Right.
It's not universal.
I didn't mean to pose it that way, but you're right.
Like,
after I thought about it, I was like,
ready.
yeah, that did sound like I just said that everybody you're going to see, everybody who's ever died. But then, you were like, we don't know. We don't really know. We don't have a good explanation. I mean, grief is obviously a good explanation, but we don't have, it's not studied or it's not.
Oh, it's studied. You just can't rule. Again, you cannot explain. You can call it hallucinations. You can call it dreams. You can call it visions. You can call it things. And that's what we do.
Yeah.
That's what we do. We call it things.
Good.
Yeah. And then we talked about, well, if it were not the ghost of her daughter visiting her, how could she have known about the broken neck of the body that was exhumed? How could she have known about that? She was quote right about that and told, allegedly. And so we talked about, and this kind of goes back again to, it doesn't really go back to priming, but that she might have had a lot of those suspicions or pieces of evidence that she collected about her son-in-law and about their relationship and about the way she was hurt or abused or any number of other ways. What we didn't talk about was that, like, she might have been around. We didn't even go to that. She might have witnessed it happen. We don't even know. Right. And there might have been even more that she knew. And that kind of fits in more with your explanation that she falsified the entire haunting because she thought that would be believed more by a jury than her own real suspicions or real things she witnessed. Yeah. As a woman in the 19th century. So that's really unfortunate, but a very compelling explanation too, that it was fabricated.
Yeah.
But if not, then there might have still been things that, whether it was subconscious or unconscious, that she had reasons for her mind to formulate this vision for her that put those pieces together.
Yeah.
And then when it confirmed, it's confirmed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what's your question on this one?
Well, there was one other thing that was left out.
Oh, sorry.
I wanted to acknowledge, because we did talk to someone who listened to the episode who brought up the fact that he sent the kid to the house to go find his wife.
Yeah.
This was a lawyer that we talked to who said that might have been a release piece for the prosecution to investigate, like, why did he send someone else to go find the body?
Because he was going into town and he didn't have time to do
Yeah.
his chores.
Yeah. Or whoever that if he finds the body, then he would have maybe had to be there when the police arrived as discovering the body, and he would have had to fake more of his reaction and all that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Poof.
So I wanted to bring that back up too, because that's more on the true crime forensic stuff that some people are into.
Yeah, and if you guys want to hear more stories like this, write in stories@paranormaloutsiders.com.
Mm-hmm.
Write in, say, hey, we want to hear more paranormal true crime stories, or we want to hear more true crime stories.
Just completely change the topic of our podcast.
No. We're still gonna keep it paranormal.
Yeah.
So if it's not paranormal enough, then we're not gonna do anything.
Yeah.
But
So here's my question.
Yeah.
In that vein of true crime, what's a case where you wish that someone involved could return and share what happened to them?
I mean, every murder trial, obviously.
Yeah, I'm just talking about high profile ones that maybe
The high profile. I mean, O.J. Simpson, Nicole Simpson.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, I think it'd be interesting. I do have an answer for this one.
Okay. Yeah, I want to hear it.
Robert F. Kennedy.
Oh.
Yeah. Bobby Kennedy.
Bobby Kennedy. And why?
Because that case is it breaks my heart. Like, he was on the road to presidency a lot of and he was really brilliant in my opinion.
Yeah.
And it's a strange one, because the convicted murderer is not a reliable reporter and had many we don't know if he had accomplices.
Oh, sounds like you've got a little conspiracy theory thing going on over here. Okay.
It is an interesting
Maybe we
thing,
got to do an episode on that.
His story is wild, and I'm not to say that he's innocent. He has been convicted of this, but it is a really strange one. The woman in the polka dot dress. There's a lot to it. Yeah.
Was she an alien?
We don't know.
Okay, well, we're going to find out.
I'm sure there's
in
a
an
theory,
episode.
a conspiracy theory about
We're
that.
going to do an episode. I'm going to find the paranormal explanation for this.
I think
we're
there's
gonna
a
do an episode
really
on
good podcast already made about it, but yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, we're going to make a better one. Okay, and on that note of aliens, we are blasting off here with the Hill abduction. That was the next episode we did. So this is largely considered the grandfather of abduction stories in the United States. It was in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
During civil rights, 2 civil rights activists were abducted and told their story about it. Not only that, they were also did, what is it called? I'm going to try to get it right. Hypnoregression therapy.
Yeah.
Hypnoregression therapy was conducted on both these people, and it was heavily reported on, and from all accounts, heavily investigated by things like Project Blue Book, different government entities. This thing blew up. It was huge. Betty and Barney, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Betty and Barney. So and Betty was alive until the, I think, mid-90s. She did interviews right up until then and said the same thing she always said. She had the same story, talked about the same stuff, never changed it once. Barney, I think, died much earlier than she did, unfortunately. A really interesting story about this couple who come back, were abducted, possibly analyzed medically for different things. There was physical evidence. There was physical, and there was like a psychological record of psychological hypnoregression therapy that was done. I think one of the most interesting things is, like, ever since we talked about this episode, we've been rewatching the X-Files, and like, I think every single episode there's like a mention of hypnoregression therapy. It doesn't matter what it is. Satanic cult, hypnoregression therapy. Aliens probing, hypnoregression therapy. Ghost in your attic, hypnoregression therapy. That's what people go through.
And Mulder being like, well, you better go ahead and hypnotize that.
Yeah.
Do hypnoregression therapy so we can find evidence.
Yeah.
I'm like, what?
This Oxford grad
Yeah.
with his bachelor's.
In psychology.
Yeah. Anyway. So really, really cool stuff. The audio for the hypnoregression is out there. I put that in the show notes. Feel free to go back and check that out. Again, it's very intense. So Once again, listener discretion is advised.
I haven't listened.
I only listened to the first couple of minutes of it, and it is it's intense.
Yeah.
It's just intense. Just let's put it that way.
That one, that's my recap, is to say, like, I probably should be, if I were really to do my due diligence, go listen to those sessions, go read the Project Blue Book report, all that, but I haven't done it.
I think, I'm still on the fence with this one. I think it's 50-50 whether they were actually abducted or not. I honestly think that, I guess this is probably giving away a little bit about what I believe, but I think I've already said this. If it's a UFO thing, I kind of believe it. It's not out of the realm of possibility, right? We're one of trillions of possible planets that can host life in our universe. Who's to say there's not an advanced civilization that's out there? Now, why they would come here and pick us up and probe us and then send us back down with shoddy with shoddy memories, like why? Like if they don't have good enough technology to erase our memory completely, like why do it, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's the question. Just like Randonautica, it's not, is it possible that there are quantum connections between us and other and computers at a cellular level or a microcellular level that can then happen? It's the question of, is this that thing? And so to me, yeah, you can be like a very prominent astrophysicist like Neil deGrasse Tyson, who believes in the possibility of other life on other planets. But is this case the best evidence for that? People being hypnotized and put into a very suggestible state, who were clearly going through distress, and the story that they tell is then taken as fact.
Right. And that's so tough and not fair, because I don't feel like it really gives the subjects justice then. Right?
Agreed.
Whereas if it was something that, but also maybe that was the best way for them. I think we did talk a little bit about how when you get up on stage, like a magician hypnotherapist, like when you get up on stage and they
not therapist, but yeah.
Oh, sorry. A magician.
Hypnotist. Come on stage.
A hypno-magician.
Yeah.
A hypno-magicianist. When you go up on stage and they're like, act like a duck, and you start walking around cracking like a duck. It's more along the lines of you can get away with it as a human being. Like it's more accepted if you do that under hypnosis, quote unquote, right? And so who's to say that this wasn't just a way for Barney to finally like let out what happened, because he was under a hypnotic state, or Betty.
Sure. Maybe. It's just you cannot
and the star
differentiate.
Map. That was another big piece of evidence, was a star map that Betty drew that ended up actually being a true star map. Now, I think if you draw signs and symbols, that's the thing about the universe. It's so vast and so random that if you draw any shapes in any order, it's a possibility that you are drawing them in a exact ratio and distance and size that there are actually 3 or 4 stars out there that might match.
And that is called a coincidence.
Yeah.
And
is it? Is that what coincidence
and
is?
That's, well, as absurd as coincidence can sound, and I think that's what we didn't really go into that. Like the people who said this looks like a star map, that's still not agreed upon across many astrologers, right?
Oh, I don't know what the number
astronomers.
I don't know what the number of people who are Tauruses agree on, but no. I don't know what the number of people who study stars agree upon versus don't agree upon.
Well, I thought you said her star map, like some said looked loosely based on, and in that way, then it looks like. But
as somebody who's a novice who can draw that, like that's still impressive. It's kind of like if, someone says, well, I was in IBM's headquarters back in the 70s, and it's like, okay, draw me what you saw. And they basically draw you like the processor that's in all of our computers nowadays. That'd be impressive.
Yeah.
That'd be like, oh shit. Okay. Yeah. I guess you were there.
And I'm still going to say, is it possible that wasn't her husband very interested in UFO stuff?
No. Aeronautics. He was a Air Force guy.
Was he not interested in the stars?
I don't think so.
Oh,
I don't think that was one of his hobbies.
Okay.
No. Nope.
Okay, then touche.
Okay, so
I can't explain the star map.
Yeah, no,
I'm not an astronomer.
Yeah, I don't, and I think that's one of the only pieces of evidence that really holds the story together, even today.
Yeah.
people look back on it and they're like, huh? I'm sure we'll see an X-Files episode where they'll talk, or Mulder will be like, what about Betty and Barney Hill back in 1960?
And the fact that she could draw a star map. That's still not evidence of an alien abduction. Sorry.
Right.
It's not. Or that she was implanted with knowledge. Yeah. Sorry.
Nope.
Mm-hmm.
What's your question on this one?
So during the podcast, one of the things I enjoyed the most listening back was that we were talking about the rational question of why do aliens do it this way? Like there would be volunteers. You don't have to kidnap people.
Yeah.
You can just look for volunteers.
Yep.
So I was curious if you were an alien, you know, and you ran your own kind of like quick service business where people could just come in and get probed, what kind of business would it be? What would you call it? Would it be like fast food? Would it be like...
It would be a business of people coming in to get probed.
I know, but what would you call it? Take some names of other...
It would be called McAbductions.
McAbductions.
Yeah, over 1 billion served.
Okay.
No, I don't know.
The obvious ones, obviously, I had some canned ones that came to
Yeah, go
mind,
ahead.
but like Jiffy Probe.
Jiffy Probe.
Jiffy
Okay,
Probe, yeah.
I like it. It's better than McAbductions.
Starbucks, done.
Yeah. Moving on, we now move into, this was actually more of a historical review than anything else, but it was Bloody Mary. And so we talked about the origins of Bloody Mary. I went through 3 different stories of women throughout history, whether fictional or not, and it's debatable. 2 of them, I think it's debatable as to whether they're fictional or not, but one of them was definitely a person. And where the name Bloody Mary came from, and where this idea of Bloody Mary came from as well. So it's the idea of staring into a mirror, saying Bloody Mary's name 3 times in candlelight, and then blowing. Sometimes it depends. Sometimes it's blowing out the candle. Sometimes you keep the candle on. Sometimes you gotta spin around 3 times. Sometimes you gotta stand on her head. Sometimes you gotta do drugs. Sometimes you gotta snort some cocaine. And then maybe you'll see something in the mirror. I think if you do the last 3 things, you will definitely see something in the mirror: spinning around, doing drugs, and cocaine, which is a drug. So it's kind of the same thing. Anyway, moving on. Yeah, so like, what do you think? Anything that we missed on this one? I feel like it was pretty cut and dry. If you do something where you limit your visibility, you limit your light, cognitive capabilities by spinning around, and making yourself dizzy, you're probably gonna see something in the mirror. Like that's not a
We talked about that, those perceptual alterations, the darkness and mirrors and dizziness and all the things, as well as expectancy, priming, and then we talked about adolescence and why their motivations to do this and why that's a piece of it.
Right.
And what's so cool, the stories that you told was we got to talk a bit about like historical possible origins of her that I really liked. And in doing that, we also got to talk about witches, and just women in general.
Right.
That's what you said.
I know.
My
I'm
favorite
sorry.
line from that podcast.
It was a mistake that'll haunt me if I ever run for public office. It's gonna be like, didn't you once call all women witches? I'll have to say, I'm so sorry about that. It was a mistake.
Yeah.
It's not what I meant.
But I think in doing that, we sort of tipped into that episode. Also, kind of covered the social explanations for witch labeling, witch hunts, like why were women called witches.
Right.
So we kind of touched on that. So I hope sometime maybe we do talk about the occult a little bit more.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, we're not done. I don't think we've had a witch case yet.
No.
Maybe that'll be the next episode.
Yeah. So we can talk a little bit more about like some practices and belief systems and stuff too. And then alleged like witchcraft, is that paranormal? Because I think what we did nicely in talking about a couple of those cases was the social motivations for labeling women's behavior as deviant.
Deviant women.
Yeah. God bless them.
God bless them. Where would we be without them?
Maybe the future that we have coming up soon. I don't know.
Hey-o, here we are. So what's your question for this one?
If
you had an alcoholic drink named after you, but it was in a ghastly way, what would it be?
My question for this one. If you could create a rite of passage type of thing that teenagers do, what would it be?
Do one thing every day that scares you. No. Oh, write a passage thing for a teenager to do.
Along the lines of Bloody Mary, with a less offensive origin.
Well, yeah, I would just there wouldn't be an origin to it.
Yeah.
I think I would just say, like, I think go and spend the night in what you consider maybe the scariest house, like an abandoned house or like a scary house or something. and then see that nothing fucking happens. And then you go on with the rest of your life and you're like, you know what? I did that this one time and it scared the shit out of me, but nothing happened and I survived and now I can go off and do anything.
That's a good one.
How
As
about
long
you?
as they don't get arrested for trespassing. That would
Oh,
be,
right. Yeah. Or like, step on like a rusty nail and get tetanus. Like, be safe about it.
Yeah.
Be safe about it, but go and break the law. No, don't go break the law. Maybe do it with permission. I don't know. Bring proper lighting. Don't stare in the mirrors. You don't need to do any of that stuff. But I would suggest that doing something that scares you. I didn't make fun of that earlier, but doing something that scares you, right? And safely.
Yeah.
Which I know most people are like, well, it's things that are unsafe are the only things that scare me. Fair enough.
Yeah. I guess that made me think I like that advice. Do something that scares you, but I would make it be much like do something that scares you because you think your friends won't think it's cool. Like go volunteer to help at a community living center for elderly people.
Yeah, and fuck your friends for saying that's not cool.
Exactly.
Fuck them. I don't like who the hell.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah, scare your friends who say that. Pop out of them in the middle of the night. They're walking to their car, go and just scare them.
You're so cool.
And be like, "Oh, you're so cool. You don't like the elderly, asshole." Kick him in the shin and run away. Okay, don't assault anybody. I don't. Okay, we're done. We're done.
I love this. Can you just Dustin's advice column?
Yeah, let's do it.
Dustin's advice corner.
Maybe we will. Okay, maybe we'll do Dustin's advice corner from now on.
This podcast does not give advice.
No. No. Do not do anything that we suggest or talk about. We don't suggest very much.
No, I mean, I do suggest for people to have like open mind and use
I did tell people to
science and
rando not,
thinking.
do the rando knots.
Yeah.
Okay.
One more.
Shapeshifters. Ooh. Shapeshifters. This was a really cool one. Again, historical references up the wazoo, but also some contemporary ones as well. 2 contemporary ones. Well, okay. 1 contemporary one. That was with Billy Corrigan. The second was a discovery of an ancient text which suggested that Jesus Christ himself was actually a shapeshifter. Now, not trying to shit on anybody's religion here, just, kind of what was discovered, the wording of what was discovered suggested that Jesus was a shapeshifter. Now, what surprises me the most about that part of it is that, and I think I said this in the episode, if Jesus was a shapeshifter, it would totally fall in line with everybody's beliefs at the time. The Romans who ran the area, they had gods and goddesses who shifted shape all the time. The Greeks, gods and goddesses who shifted shape all the time. The Nords, gods and goddesses who shifted shape all the time. Like, it wouldn't be that weird for this guy to come down and say, I'm the son of God, and then, like, shift shapes. They'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, cool, man, you sure are. And then move on with their lives. So, really weird that was, like, in a text somewhere. Also, from a law enforcement perspective, it's totally understandable that the Romans who were trying to arrest this guy were like, every time we hear, every time someone says who this person is, we go to arrest him and it's not him. It's not the guy. Like you said, it was this old guy. It wasn't the old guy. It was the young guy.
That is pretty funny.
Yeah.
It's very like Benny Hill.
Yeah. So, as far as the psychological thing, we talked about mistrust. We talked about...
Yeah, we talked about... You got me going on really broad evolutionary, contextual, behavioral, compassion, focus, psychology, emotion, stuff, motivation. And I just talked about because this cuts across cultures so much, that's... I think in the paranormal realm, a lot of people say that that's evidence for the paranormal because it cuts across human cultures. And... However, from a psychological perspective, things that cut across human cultures we see as being at the kind of universal human motivations and needs, and not necessarily evidence that it happens because it's not the same exact thing happening across cultures, right? Every single one of those examples that you gave were nuanced and different.
Yes.
Right? So that's not evidence that like this thing is happening.
Well,
because it's identical. So
it seems like from the ancient side, from the quote unquote indigenous people sides, it was very similar. It was very similar from the Greek, Nord, Roman regional very
theme.
much the same, but different, right? So like the Native Americans and the Aboriginals had a very specific thing that they thought about. Those are medicine men, or
2 very different,
not
geographically,
right, but viewed in modern culture as kind of very similar. Again, indigenous peoples kind of kind of context,
and
right?
more connected
to
okay.
nature.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
But
Whereas-
and I would say you could argue that in the Norse mythology that was it Odin turned into a raven? Like that's pretty nature connected.
Great Odin's raven.
Thank you. And that's the only
I think
reason
he
I know
had
that
two
one.
ravens.
Okay.
Yeah,
Had the pet
sorry.
and he also turned into it.
I don't think he turned into it. I think the ravens were his messengers.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
Yeah.
That's just what I remember from a really Western civilization
it's
back in college.
Yeah. So anyway, my nuanced knowledge of each of these isn't good. And from a broad cutting across kind of human motivation, I talked just a bit about it falling into the realm of achievement motivation, fantasies of achievement, aspiration of these as like superpower sort of things that would be amazing to be able to do. And perhaps also then connecting back to our our nature as we are human animals and connecting to what other animals can do that we can't. It's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
And then I talked about the scary side, the fear-based side, and the also the need for belonging, and then the in-group, out-group dynamics of who you trust and don't trust. So yeah, that's kind of what we talked about with that.
Yeah, it kind of came full circle with the Black-Eyed Children thing.
It did.
Yeah.
How do you like that?
Hey.
Whoa.
On purpose, I designed this whole thing.
I would see, listening back to
kidding.
Shapeshifters in our intro, I feel really bad because I said that we might be more qualified than a zoologist, and I meant less. That should go with less qualified.
We are not as qualified as a zoologist
to look at things like shapeshifters, because like the video evidence you provided of what looked to me like a four-legged animal walking through the desert, and the person was like, "Oh my god, it's a skinwalker."
Jack Osborne.
Yeah, and whereas a zoologist who understands desert species would be like, "That's clearly a coyote," or something,
Yeah.
So they're more qualified.
Yeah. Odin had two ravens, Hugin and Munin. One was thought, and one was memory.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. Yes. So in the Shapeshifter episode, lots of really cool things. Nothing obviously substantiated. I did hear recently from a family member who watches Howard Stern on the rig that Billy Corgan is actually writing a book about. He's writing a book, and then in that book, he's going to tell his shapeshifting story.
The tell-all story, which makes me want to caveat the part where I said, "Oh, it doesn't seem like he's getting any extra gain or attention from this." It's and now he's like, "Oh, everybody stay tuned. I'm going to write about it."
Billy Corgan.
Like, you're a musician.
So write about
your music.
I still follow him very closely, and he has this chip on his shoulder about rock history and how he doesn't really feel like he's been given his due. I think you mentioned that in the episode.
Yeah.
First of all, Billy, if you're out there listening to this podcast, and I know you are, because why wouldn't you listen to this podcast? It's amazing.
Well, if he hears we're talking about him, he probably will.
You had a profound impact on my life. He did. Billy Corgan had a profound impact on my life. And I don't care who knows it, including you, Billy. You know it now.
Did he?
And I'm definitely not the only one. Like his lyrics, his music,
beautiful,
amazing. Like again, you're definitely in my top 3, if not number 1.
Oh.
So
you hear that, Billy?
You and maybe you're like, who the hell are you? You have a podcast with like 10 listeners. Okay, a little bit more than 10. I'm not the only one. I know I'm not. I know I'm not the only one.
I'm not the only one in this room. I can't say it as strongly as you.
There are CEOs, if that matters to you. There are creative artists, if that matters to you. There are people all around the world who I don't know why I'm doing this big thing for
You're
Billy
also
Corgan
well. I was
right
saying
now.
it might be more important for him to hear that you are a musician, that you have musical talent yourself, Dustin.
Yeah,
and he inspired that.
Yeah, I definitely like some of my first songs I ever learned were most certainly from Melancholy and Infinite Sadness on the guitar. But anyway, look, man, you're good. You don't need to write a book just to get attention. You've got my attention no matter what.
Yeah.
And I wish you the best of luck in everything. But I also will buy your book and read that book.
Just for that part. Tell him you will read the musical memoir part of it too.
No, I will.
Yeah.
I will. I'll read the whole thing, but...
All right, you think you know what my question's going to be?
Your question.
Yeah. Can you guess my question?
If you were a shapeshifter, what shape would you shift into?
Exactly.
Okay. I think it would be an animal. I think I would be like I think it's going to be boring. I think I'd be a werewolf.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Maybe the jellyfish who can live forever and regenerate. That's a good one, too.
Yeah, I think
if that shifts back into your human body, too. So, like, you shift into the jellyfish who lives forever, and then, when your human body you retake your human form, you get to do that. Yeah.
So a werewolf, including the fact that you don't control it, like that lore?
No.
Okay. You
No.
would be
I have animal instincts and everything, but I'm more like
an animagus.
more like Padfoot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A big dog.
More like Sirius Black than a Lupin.
Interesting. That really fits because it's so stealthy and so like you could sneak around in the dark.
Oh well, a fox would be my obvious, but
Yeah.
that's not like super lore. So
no,
wait,
it could be anything.
Yeah, no, we actually read there was the Asian shapeshifters who are like foxes who seduce men. I don't really want to seduce any men, but I want to be a fox, and if that's a side effect, well then I'll be sexy
Seduce
to men.
men as foxes, so there's like bestiality involved in that, or I don't think we understand this cross culturally here. I don't think we're getting the.
Do you remember in
Lovecraft Country?
Lovecraft
the
Country
TV show. Yeah.
Yeah, remember the
Yeah.
cryptid?
Yeah.
She was that thing. She remember the foxtails came out and everything.
Yeah. Also probably rooted in mistrust of women and some misogyny there. Anyway, I digress.
Well, yeah, the Asian like they were all seducing men. There was no women seducing foxes, so I'm guessing when they did seduce men, they turned into women. Anyway, fox or wolf? How about you?
That's yours. I would want the ability to fly or swim, live underwater. So it would be
Mermaid?
maybe a penguin.
Penguin?
Maybe.
Penguins can't fly.
They can't fly, and they also can't. Okay.
They can barely swim.
Can barely swim.
Actually, no. They can swim really well. They can barely walk on land.
Right,
They're like when they're
really
walking
well,
on land, they're like,
not like you're right.
They're like, God, kill me, please.
They can't fly.
Put me back in the water.
Would a penguin be better? Or not a pelican? Would a pelican be better?
Anna became a penguin every chance she got.
Waddling around.
She waddles around when she's on the land.
They're so cute.
But she dives when she can. That's my Morgan Freeman impersonation. Was that good?
No.
Oh, man.
This was fun.
Yeah.
For me.
That is a great note to end this episode on. This is a recap episode. We'll be doing these every 10 episodes or so.
Yeah.
Or so. We'll see. But thanks for listening in.
Ooh.
Boom.
Done.
Nailed it. Thanks for listening in, everybody. Again, if you have any recommendations for any stories at paranormaloutsiders.com. Please send us an email, and we'll get back to you. If you enjoyed listening to this one, and especially if this is your first time listening, you enjoyed listening to any particular synopsis of the story we told, go back and listen to the whole thing. If this is your first time tuning in,
Oh, you ruined it.
If this is your first time listening in, go back and listen to all 10 episodes or 9 episodes before this one anyways. Just
and then
do
you
it.
can hear Dustin saying tuning in multiple more times.
Then you'll get the joke. It's an inside joke. You don't get it until you listen to all of them. No, go back and take a listen. Really, really great episodes. We had a lot of fun doing them. We hope you had a lot of fun listening to them, or will have a lot of fun listening to them. Thanks, everybody, for listening in.
Bye.